3 weeks prior to our trip to Israel, we had this very special dinner with Dr. Lynn Dickens at Tony's as a celebratory dinner. And a couple was going to Israel the next day, and they connected us to Osnat. She had such a wealth of information about all of the places. She was so on task, and of course, you know me, I mean, I've given her all these specific instructions of we have to go to, on day one. We finally get to the old city of Jerusalem, and I am about to faint. I'm so starving. And of course, I don't speak up on time, and I finally just blurted out, like, I have to eat right now. And she's funny, and she's like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I wasn't happy about that. So, you know me, I plan these trips very meticulously, yeah. Then I hand it over and the guide's in control, and I'm sort of not in control.
Ryan did all the planning. Please, he never likes to do that part or be in control of anything.
Yeah, you can probably see why I'm having a little bit of an issue with that.
Yes, he is wonderful about that. The first time we went overseas, went to Cape Town, he had the binder and every day planned out.
I think the world of her, and I think, oh gosh, I would highly recommend her to anybody that is traveling to Israel or Jerusalem. Day one of touring, we went to Jerusalem, and the theme was the footsteps of Jesus. So we started at the top of the Mount of Olives, and you could see all of Jerusalem. And at the base of the Mount of Olives was the Church of All Nations. Yeah, okay, so next to the church is the Garden of Gethsemane. And in the church, there's this beautiful mosaic, and it describes the scene where Judas, the way he told the Romans was he kissed him, so they knew who it was. I just have a funny story at this point. You're like in these really, really important places, and so you don't want to say anything disrespectful or stupid. And so at this point, I'm just so curious and confused, and I didn't want to seem like a bad religious scholar, but I just had to ask our guide. I was like, I have to ask you this question. I was like, why did Judas turn him in? I was like, well, I don't get it. So anyway, she's like, for money, it was for, money. They kind of bribed him, and our guide was fabulous, and she answered the question. The room where they had the Last Supper, it was a church for many, many centuries, and then it became a mosque. She's like, you see how, this is from the Christian times, and this is from when it was a mosque, and over there in the room that's where the Last Supper was. Are we gonna go in there? Are we gonna go? And she's like, well, there's nothing to see, and I'm like, well, I really don't care if there's nothing to see. I'm going in. I need to be able to tell my parents I went into the room where they had the Last Supper. So we went to the Wailing Wall. Number one, you have to wear a yarmulke to go to the wall, and these were made available to us. They had this glass case, and you can just take one. Only men can go to the majority of the wall. There's a small portion on the right where women can go to pray. Then traced a lot of the footsteps of Jesus. This was also something very hard for me to understand. I was like, what do you mean they took him in a church to beat him? Okay, nothing was there. But because that's where something happened, this is where they built a church. So we follow up the road, Via Dolorosa, and there's 14 different places that Christ took in his last steps. Eventually you get to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where he was crucified. There's a marble slab where he was oiled and anointed, That was a whirlwind of an emotional day. If you remember our trip to Dublin and our friend Geraldine, she really pulled some strings for us.
So I'm there, I'm so overwhelmed by the noise.
That's how we met the minister of children, Francis Fitzgerald. It was totally out of control.
And I'm trying to find a place to have lunch. All these cafes are outside and everybody's having their whatever. I'm like, don't you hear it? Isn't it making you go crazy too? So I see this one place and it has a sliding glass door. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be able to go inside. So I go inside, still hear the horns, but not as loud. Very nice young man working there. His name was Eli. I went back a couple other times. So I'm sitting there, have this espresso Diet Coke. It was very relaxing. And he was just like, how do you do your art full time? How do you sell it? How do you do it? I'm like, you just do it. A gentleman walks into the bar, or tries to. The glass door did not push or pull, it slid. So this man's out there pushing, pulling, you know, the glass is shaking, and there were 4 paintings hanging on the wall.
I think John's kind of looking at him, and
then he's coming down the stairs, and I say to myself, he's gonna knock a painting off that wall. So of course this painting comes flying down the stairs, and then I look up and he's still coming down, this painting's blocking the stairs, and I ask the bartender, you want me to? He goes, don't, no. I go, yes, please. And so I get the painting, and he comes to us on the stairs. He's like, thank you very much. Gets his coffee, goes outside. I hang the painting back up on the wall, and I sit down, and I just said to Eli, I said, I knew when he came down, one of those paintings were gonna fall. And he said, well, you know he's famous. And I'm like, what?
Yossi Sarid, I could be pronouncing that wrong, but he's the former Israeli Minister of Education and Minister of the Environment.
He's done, you know, espressos don't take long. I get my camera, the chip's not in there because I went to the photo place earlier, right? So I'm like, he's already walking down the street, and I'm like, Yossi! I did a portrait for the Minister of Children in Ireland last year. I just think it's kind of weird how these kind of connect. Don't you think that's kind of interesting too, right? Yeah.
Another person that was quite notable, totally surprised, is the art studio owner named Natasha. She's like, oh, my husband is the coach of the Israeli cricket team. And I was like, really? Okay, wow. You know, so that was special. He's such a nice guy. His name is Herschel. They do have a gay beach. It's called the Hilton Beach because it's in front of the Hilton Hotel. And so it was sort of my main goal to get our living situation near this beach. You know, we walked to the water, and then we walked like 5 minutes down, and it was right there. So that's where I went to the beach every day when we weren't trapped. And the men are stunning. I mean, I mean, fill in the blank. Oh, okay. The most gorgeous man maybe I've ever met in the history of the world. His name is Eliad Cohen. We met him at the beach, and he was introduced to us through our friend Jared. He is the founder of Gayville. He's an international model, and he's been on the cover of the Spartacus International Gay Guide. The second day, we started out at the Holocaust Museum. There's an art, it's like a triangle coming out of the ground, but once you really get inside, you see that it's the very top, you know, so it's deep underneath the ground. And it takes you kind of step by step through not only the brutality of the Holocaust, but like how the Nazis just had everybody transfixed. John was there for at least 3.5 hours. At the end, you go into this room. There's a well, and there's a dome, and there's faces of many of the victims. I saw the faces of the victims. I saw the reflection from the ceiling. That's what I saw. Around this room, there's these tomes, and every single page tells the story of one of the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. A third of the walls are empty because those, you know, they're not accounted for. We left, and I had to eat. And John was still in there.
And you really have to go somewhere to understand or take a concept of something. Speaking only for Israel, because that's the only country we visited, it's very peaceful. There's not unrest or things in the streets.
That's where we dropped my parents' prayer card. You couldn't take any pictures inside there.
So I really wanted to portray many elements of the trip. Scenes, photos, painting.
But the grounds were beautiful, and so we dropped their prayer card next to some very beautiful flowers.
Both painting and photos, imagery of all these different places we went.
We went to the Alma Mall Contemporary Art Museum, and our guide had contacted the director, and so she told us all about the history of this artist collective.
So each piece has many elements of inspiration, and it's hard to describe because I think it was more than ever this year.
And it was very, very similar to escapist art movement. I mean, it's empowering, it's teaching these people how to sell, how to promote. I mean, so it was just like these bells were going off. I was like, this is great.
But I really wanted to put a part of the dynamic part of that world, the Middle East. I think it sounds so exotic, or when I would text somebody, well, I'm in Tel Aviv. I think that sounds so on the other side.
This is so perfect, and this was picked by Robin and Joan. They sent us there. They are such big collectors and supportive of John's work.
So I don't ever have an idea because I have to wait for that to come, and it's not that I don't allow it to come, it's just I get absorbed into it, and then with the intensity of these horns honking and all that suffering, really, brought me into that place.
She's given us these gifts of these gorgeous catalogs they had produced from their last show, just like John and I did. There on the wall is one of the items in the catalog, okay?
It's hard when you're there, not Tel Aviv, but when you're in that place of being in the moment, it's painful.
I interrupted her because she and John are now really bonding, and I said, well, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but are these available for purchase?
But then it really allows me to be there to create the real energy of that place.
Can I buy this? Can we buy this? And she said, yeah, of course. She checked on the price, and she said it was $70. And so we didn't pick that one, and here's why. Because two of the ones, we bought two, that were also in the catalog, the artist was there. We got to meet the artist, he signed our catalogs, we have our picture with him and me. Okay, so that couldn't have gone any better. Then the final stop that day was the Wool Rose Garden. The reason I picked that for John and me is I Googled the most romantic places in Israel. And this place was listed as #1, was in Jerusalem. It's at the foot of the Israeli Supreme Court, which I thought was very meaningful for John and me. They're for roses from around the world. Countries have given roses. And so that's where we dropped our prayer card, was at a rose garden.